I don't know if you checked this out at all. Rich Eisen did a series of 6 episodes, each about an hour long, called This Was Sportscenter. And basically, what he's doing is sitting down with someone who was on SportsCenter back in the day. I think maybe in a couple
Yeah.
instances, the person still is. Like, Chris Berman's still there, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes. He is
uh,
nominally, I think, and part time, still there, still active. Yes.
yeah, it's like I don't know if he does anything besides show up on Monday Night Football in the halftime, like
Yeah,
but
that's right.
uh but that relates to the broader conversation I think we're all going to have here because then news breaks just this week that they're laying people off. This is in part because of the merger with NFL Network. Um so I guess my first question, Ryan, is have you checked this out at all? Do you know what I'm talking about? This Rich Eisen series?
I have heard this actually is in my podcast feed. I've not listened to any of these, and but this is as you and I are from the same same generation. This is right up my alley, right? This is certainly my speed of things that I will now, particularly because of what's been in the news lately, something I will listen to. It's a video podcast as I understand, right? You can do audio or video of this, right?
Yeah, I watched it on YouTube.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I believe it is also available, as they say, wherever you get your podcasts, if you want to just,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
get the audio. I wonder, I should look into this at some point. This is a tangent, but Netflix is quote doing podcasts now. Like, can you get them in an RSS feed to download to your podcast app from
I
Netflix?
I think so. At least I think the ones I
Yeah.
know they have an agreement right now with Spotify. So I think it's anything that's in part of that agreement you can certainly get as part of Spotify. But I don't
Yeah.
know if all of their podcasts are available in that format.
Yeah, I hope so, because otherwise, in my mind, you should be able to call them podcasts. And I know that we're going to be talking business a little bit here, so this is still part of the tangent. But my
Yeah.
understanding is a part of why Netflix is labeling things as podcasts instead of talk shows is because
Right.
it gets around certain union rules in certain ways. Like if you label something as a talk show, you'd have to pay people more, basically.
Yeah.
So it's kind of whatever. Anyway,
I've been seeing a lot more recently the term vodcast. Have you seen this before? I've seen that a lot more frequently these days.
vodcast with a V.
Podcast, as you know, these blogs became vlogs, and now podcasts have become vodcasts.
Yeah, man, I know. I've seen that tons of times over the past decade. It's like it's like stop trying to make Fletch happen, kind of thing. It's not going to happen. It's not and I mean, it is interesting how this term podcast stuck, and
Exactly.
it makes no sense whatsoever. Um, Particularly since increasingly people even forget why that term originally, because it played on the iPod of all things. Um, but anyway, to pull it back here, as far as this with SportsCenter goes, definitely, we're the target audience, and others. I mean, it is definitely nostalgia, which I
Yeah.
often don't
Yeah.
endorse. But one of the things that I appreciated, and it varies a bit because he's always interviewing someone different. So, like, I think it's the first one where he interviews Dan Patrick, and it was like that might be the best one. They might
Mm.
have kind of ordered them in that sort of. Well, the one with Chris Berman is also really good. That's like the second one. So there
Yeah.
was. I did have a little bit of this experience of like, are we just kind of slowly, ticking down? I don't know, but they were all pretty
Yeah.
entertaining. And it's not everyone, right? So I believe Rich Eisen wants to do more. Maybe they'll do a second season.
Hmm.
Whatever. But, tied up in that is not just the nostalgia of, remembering being a teenager or into college, even, in that area in the 90s, early aughts,
Yeah.
watching the old Sports Center. Um, but also what makes the conversations interesting, in particular to me, is some of the kind of quote inside baseball stuff about like the production of Sports Center and what's going on behind the scenes. And so, in part it's nostalgia, but it's also, for me at least, an appreciation of the craft of what they were doing at the time that I enjoy.
Yeah, that is an interesting perspective of sort of looking at it from both ways. I do feel, having not heard or seen any of these, that it would probably be the nostalgia that hits me most. As we've said, we're the generation. I mean, this was literally on my TV every night for what? 8 years, 10 years. I mean, these same people over and over and over again. And no matter what I was doing, I would, before I go to bed, check in on SportsCenter to see what happened because that's where you saw highlights and that's where you got sort of the most entertaining recap of what happened during the day. We're just so obviously proliferated now and sort of where you can get content like that. And SportsCenter is not that anymore. And so yeah, just would be interesting to check out. I'm sure I will at some point.
Yeah, and I mean the things hang together in a certain way, which I find interesting to think about because in part it is the I don't know the technological advancement or the speed of communication and the internet,
Yeah.
the rise of the World Wide Web and all of this, which we're old enough to like recall happening when we were teenagers. Um, but that at the point when SportsCenter started, and for a while, you know, actually all the way through the 1990s, um, it was done in a way that presumed that when you turned on SportsCenter, you didn't know what had happened in the game yet,
Correct.
you know?
Correct.
Um, and I appreciate that. I miss it. Like, so I don't even watch it anymore. I don't watch SportsCenter. I can't recall the last time I watched SportsCenter. Um, I mean, I vaguely can because it wasn't that long ago because I had this period a couple years ago where I was religiously watching Around the Horn and Pardon the Interruption
Yeah.
like every day, and then SportsCenter comes on right afterwards. But I think I would always turn it off. But
Yeah.
before,
Or
you
sports
know,
center.
I don't know if they still do this or not because I know PTI is still on, right?
Mhm.
Um, they canceled Around the Horn, which I was upset about. But it would go, they would have like the final segment of Part of the Interruption, like 10 minutes into SportsCenter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Well, I recall, I mean, this was back to being a teenager, going to Astros games and wanting to make sure that I was home, watch the highlights of the things that I'd just seen at the game. I just wanted to, oh, this was such an exciting thing. I want to see what SportsCenter says about it. And I don't know, that's just lost over the years, I guess.
yeah, they don't do highlights in the same way. And I mean, I guess again, it makes sense. One of the things I thought was interesting, and I forget which conversation this was in, was about when management called a meeting, and the point of the meeting
Mm.
was we're going to start doing the ticker of the scores at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
And everyone who worked on SportsCenter objected, right? But that's the thing. That's why I said with some confidence it was all the way through the 1990s because that happened after 9/11, right? Because 9/11 was really when everyone started doing that. That's when all the
Yeah.
news, CNN started doing that in all the places, and then ESPN. And it really, that changed things. So that all makes sense, and it's maybe a little bit hard to parse what is just nostalgia, I mean, like if they really were to do it in the old style, would we watch it now when we
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
all this speedy, access to information? Um, I don't know, but another thing they talk about on there, and apologies to anyone listening who just like really doesn't care about sports or Sports Center. Um,
We are
but
getting to something very relevant shortly. Yeah.
what is about TV, and
Yeah.
Rich Eisen is interesting in this because he was let go by Sports Center long ago, um, and didn't want to be.
Yep.
And that was before he took the gig at NFL Network. And now he's back because of this business. I don't know, like, do you understand this? And it's like, whatever. It's like ESPN bought NFL Network, but now the NFL owns 10% of ESPN or something. That's a short version I have it up in my mind. Um, so anyway, Rich Eisen's back technically working for ESPN, and but then through the conversations, he also talks about almost all of these people left in one way or another,
Mhm.
um, and and how that went down, and so on and so forth. Um, and again, now we've got the news in part because of that merger or whatever the right term exactly is for kind of convoluted business deal, as I understand it. Um, they've laid off Ryan Clark apparently mid-show. I have to agree. I was watching Mike Florio's PFTPM. He called it Bush League. I agree. Um, his point being like they didn't want him to find out otherwise. They wanted to tell him himself. And I don't know if you agree with this, but Florio was like, "All right, yeah, that makes sense." There's a range of bad possibilities here, right? And you're right that him finding out, on the internet or whatever, would be a bad way for it to go. But that is just
Yeah.
above you telling him while he's on the air. That is actually a worse option.
Well, my understanding of this is the timeline was right because the Ryan Clark news leaked first. I guess this was on Monday, and so that leaked a story from the Athletic, I want to say, and then as that leaked, obviously it started blowing up online. And so I think what their fear was is that, in a commercial break for the show, he's going to find out on his when he checks his phone that he's been let go. And so they just immediately, when the show went to break, grabbed him and told him and took him off midair just to try to, save their skins from him not finding out through, other means.
I don't know, man. Let him finish the show. It is all I can say. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because maybe you would take the chance that he'd find out because he's checking his phone or something. But I don't know. Do they do that? That should be against the rules, in my opinion. Anyway, I'm sure it's not. It's
Yeah.
try not to go on too much of a rant about how I do feel like there have been declining sort of production standards and so on at
Yeah. Yeah.
ESPN. That's part of why I don't tend to watch it anymore.
It was sort of
Um,
like you fire a preacher at a church. You don't give him the next Sunday to get up in the pulpit and give a vital sermon. You're afraid he's going to air all the dirty laundry. I think they just don't want him finding out and then going on the air and saying, what the hell? Here's what I'm about to go on some kind of rant, and they have to cut to black or whatever that they end up doing.
I guess it just strikes me as unprofessional. And then,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
like,
the whole thing.
yeah, I mean, if he had found out on his own during a commercial break and had proceeded to go on a rant on the air, that would have been unprofessional on his part. So it's like you're
Exactly.
not trusting him to not do that and be a
Correct.
professional about it. Anyway, in my opinion, I've already said a couple times I don't really watch ESPN anymore. So I guess probably they don't really care about me. They've already lost me. And maybe there are those who are still on board for what they're doing, which I guess is going to be what, like even more Pat McAfee, who
Yeah, so this to me is a
and Stephen
conversation
A.
about.
Smith.
Yeah, this is a conversation about trade-offs and opportunity cost, right? The idea that to be able to afford or um, retain your Pat McAfee's and your Stephen A. Smiths and the others who are big personalities, you have to let go of people like Ryan Clark, who I'm indifferent or agnostic on. I don't, care one way or the other, but people like Carl Ravitch and Stefan Neville, I am followed for more than 20 years. I mean, Carl
Yeah,
Ravitch is part of that group. When it was baseball season, I watched Baseball Tonight and SportsCenter, and Carl Ravitch and Peter Gammons were always a part of that. And so you lose, Carl Ravitch just called Sunday Night Baseball or Monday Night Baseball right before this all happened. And so you lose some of this. Um, I'm sure they're all professional, but sort of a level of professionalism and expertise that ESPN was known for to get, bolder, bigger, more prominent voices, I guess. And I just am not one that's a fan of that trade-off.
yeah, me neither. Also, Tom Pelissero has been let go, who I'm a fan of. He's actually of the quote NFL insiders, whatever. He's kind of my favorite one, whatever that's worth. So I don't know, like, and I'm curious to see what those people do. I mean, it's also part of the shifting landscape where I feel like a lot of stuff does go on through podcasts, through YouTube or whatever. Like
Yeah,
Mina Kimes at this point is probably the one person at ESPN whose work I do really enjoy, at least off the top of my
yeah,
head. I mean, I guess if they're still doing PTI, Mike and Tony are cool. Um, but I struggle to think of more that I would list. And even with that, like I'll watch Mina Kimes on YouTube, and I think what I'm watching generally is not through ESPN.
yeah,
I'm not positive what their arrangement is in the background of that, but personally, I have really no interest in Pat McAfee. I don't enjoy watching him, and part of it I think is almost irrational or something, some weird
yeah.
distaste. Like I always want him to sit down and put a real shirt on, and that probably makes me like a boomer or something. But um, And then Stephen A, I feel like he's always yelling. Anyway, it's probably enough on all of this. And it's just so sad to see what's going on. Um, and also how, with this merger with the NFL Network, it makes me feel like have we lost the NFL Network? Because in a way, the NFL Network would be or felt for a while like a different kind of option, at least with regard to getting football
Yeah.
coverage
Yeah.
that felt different. And I believe they're continuing to do the NFL Network.
Hmm.
Will it continue to feel different, or will it have that kind of, I don't know, will it be like some ESPNification of it,
That's
you know?
exactly the phrase I was about to use. I mean, t Tom Pelissero is just he's caught up in a numbers game here. When you buy the NFL Network, you get Ian Rappaport and you get Tom Pelissero. And when you already have Adam Schefter, sort of
Yeah,
what's the need for, a third breaking news guy? And so you're not going to fire Schefter or Rappaport. So Pelissero is the one to go.
yeah, exactly. Curious to see what all these people do moving forward. I mean, I presume that they'll do something, you know.
Yeah.
But kind of a sad day. And I know we've gone long on this, but one final point I did want to hit a little bit is you see in a lot of the coverage of this, people saying, well, but it's business reasons, and like you just did it a little bit. And I think that's perfectly fair what you just said, because that's true, right?
Yeah.
So you have redundancies and that makes sense. And of course, like all of this makes sense from a certain point
Yeah.
of view. So I'm not disputing that. What I'm trying to somehow articulate is at the same time, or on the flip side of that, what they're doing for, you know, putatively business reasons to help their bottom line or whatever is like losing me as a consumer of their product. And then I don't know
Yeah.
how many people are like me. And then, yeah, if you're just thinking about it as a business, you can do the calculation and say, well, hey, sorry, Cameron, more people like Pat McAfee and more
Yeah.
people like Stephen A. Smith, and people are tuning in for that stuff. And not enough people watched Around the Horn, so that's
Mhm.
gone. You know what I mean? And if that's true, and it's just a shame. And then I don't know.
Yeah.
Then that's why I ultimately am like, okay, well, let me go find some YouTubers I'd
Well,
prefer to watch and listen to.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The one, well, not benefit from this, but I guess silver lining is the fact that we live in an age where it is not hard to put independent, less shackled voices out there for the things that you want to hear and the people you want to hear from. I mean, you can get these people out in a variety of ways and a variety of places, whether it's on their own or in some other program. We had this conversation when we talked about Underdog, right? And the idea that
Yeah,
we can take these guys and whether it's with another company or on their own, we can hear them tomorrow if we wanted to. And so we're not at least in the 90s where it was SportsCenter or nothing.
yeah, it's true. It's just a shame that's just because there is a side of that too, where it's like, okay, well, but then most people at least aren't making Chris Berman money anymore. They aren't making Olbermann money even or whatever from like what SportsCenter used to be paying people,
Right.
and bang, I think McAfee's making a lot of money. Anyway, so we'll leave it all there, I guess, um, and try to shift gears here. Yeah, apologies if anyone doesn't care about all the sports stuff, but I mean, with SportsCenter as a jumping off point and this Rich Eisen series, which I have been watching this week, I really do have those memories of,
Yeah.
one thing we didn't talk about along those lines. You talked about rushing home to see how they covered on the highlights, but also like the fact that they would rerun the same SportsCenter all night.
Yeah.
There were times when I would like leave it on.
Yeah. You just didn't care. Yeah.
Uh, or you could get in that kind of expectation of, oh, it's late at night, I'm going to turn on SportsCenter, and then like, oh, it's halfway through, well, whatever, I'll just wait until it starts over again
Yep.
and see the first half.
Yep. Yep.
And they don't do that anymore because it's just it wouldn't make the same kind of sense anymore,
Right.
right?